In this episode of Table Scraps, well, you don't know what you're gonna get.
Welcome to Table Scraps, short discussions about board, card, and tabletop gaming, submitted by the viewing audience and discussed with the viewing audience.
Hey there everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Table Scraps. I'm your host, Chaz Marler, and in this show we are going to be discussing a topic about board, card, tabletop games, and gaming with the live streaming YouTube chat. And not only are we going to be discussing it, but today's topic of discussion was submitted by someone in the chat as well. And that topic of discussion comes to us today from viewer Stephen Miller, who mentions the following. Since loot boxes seem to exploit the same psychological vulnerabilities as the gambling industry, oh boy, it's hard to argue that they shouldn't be regulated in some capacity. Should tabletop games distributed in blind packs be covered by the same regulation as well? Why or why not? Stephen here, who goes by Gazentia in our chat often, has actually a link here to a nice Twitter feed as well. In this video's description, there will be a link to that full Twitter thread as well, so you can check that out if you would like to. First of all, do loot boxes exploit the same psychological vulnerabilities as the gaming industry? Well, somewhat. I do, actually. I know that there is that rush of cracking open a pack, you know, and especially when you get something and you receive it and you open up, what am I going to get? And you might get something. That, in a way, I think tickles that part of the brain. I remember being at like the game store when I was buying magic packs a lot, you know, back like during Ice Age and stuff like that, way back then when I was first getting into Magic. And I remember opening up a pack and going, ooh, neat. And sometimes you'd get something really cool and it's like, neat, I'm going to go put this in a deck. Sometimes you'd open up a pack that was a total dud and your first instinct started to become, at least my first instinct, started to become, throw that out. I'm going to just get one more. And yeah, there's definitely some sort of psychological, for lack of a better, more accurate word, addiction that can come with that. You know, that feeling, that rush of, oh, I got something good. And it was a bit of a risk, a gamble. Gamble, though, I don't know if that is the right word here. Risk actually may be the better word. This leads me to the second part of Stephen's question here. Should tabletop games distributed in blind packs, such as customizable card games or loot boxes, for the sake of this discussion, be covered by similar regulation as gambling? No, I don't think so. I think the primary reason why is because the consumer is purchasing something and they are going to get something out of it. It's not like a sweepstakes or a contest where you might put in money and get nothing out of it. The consumer is always going to be getting something out of this. You know, it's just random. You know, and if the argument becomes, well, it's random, you might get something that's really valuable, you might get something that's not valuable. Well, how is that any different than purchasing a box of pre-sweetened cereal that has a free toy inside, or getting a Happy Meal where you're not sure which Happy Meal toy you're going to get, or, you know, basically not even buying something blind, but having an option between like a Beanie Baby, a red one and a blue one. They're right there on the shelf in front of you. You can purchase either one you want. Now, one of these two is going to actually become super valuable in a couple of years and be worth 1,000-fold what you pay for it. And the other one is not. Well, you have no way of knowing that either. So whichever one you purchase is also kind of a random risk investment in that way. Everything is going to be worth what people are willing to pay for it. So I think it goes into more of the realm of buyer beware. You know, if you have a chance of getting, you know, this common item or perhaps this rare one, well, you know what potentially is in there. You know all of the variables that exist in this potential purchase. It's up to the consumer in that point to determine, well, what would you rather have? The chance at buying this, getting one of this set, you're going to get one, a random selection from this set, or your money. And I think that's really, to me, that's what it boils down to and why. We're going to be joined first today by Meeple Critic, who says, similar to digital regulations, I think a good step for analog games with blind packs would be to require the public release of the drop rate percentages for different items or rarities or cards, etc. Now that would be really cool and spiffy. Some sort of spoiler list or some sort of documentation saying, hey, here's your odds. I think that's totally fair. Trevin joins us to say the packs are quote-unquote blind, but not blind. You know exactly what you're getting in as far as common, uncommon, and rares, so there's a predictability. And I think predictability and statistics really go a far way into this. If there is an amount of predictability that can be done, I think that takes the gambling edge off of it quite a bit. Trevin continues to say that loot boxes offer nothing tangible. Physical cards can be traded or sold in a way that digital content isn't. There's also an actual thing that requires manufacturing rather than a code to be copied. That's a really good point, Trevin, because actually, you know what? I'm going to use Magic again as another analogy, because Magic also has this digital version, this Magic Online, which I admit I really got into because all the friends I had at the time were remote, and so we played Magic Online together. But with Magic Online, you're purchasing the virtual cards, and they're at the mercy of Magic's server. They are actually, nothing, and they aren't tangible. They aren't physical cards. And a lot of people were like, well, since they aren't physical, they should be cheaper, shouldn't they? They should be less expensive. And of course they're not. They're the same price. But it's funny how some people and companies treat the digital loot boxes the same as physical material goods. I don't know, honestly, if that's a good thing or a bad thing, Again, in a way, I guess it might just be the mood I'm in today. It just depends what people would rather have than money. But one thing I know for certain is that this is the internet, so there's not going to be a shortage of opinions on the matter. So what do you think about that? This is one of the big questions I would love to see followed up in the comments below. Do you think that there should be a difference between physical and digital content, whether it be loot boxes or just gaming content in general? That may be a branch where we need to branch off into an episode completely dedicated about just that. Kabuki, who says, I've been playing Magic since 1994, and I haven't bought boxes or packs in ages. I learned the best way to get what I want is simply to buy the singles. Saves a lot of hassle and money that way. Loot boxes are fun, to a point, but it's always better simply getting what you really want instead of random craziness. I'm glad you mentioned that, Kabuki, because right there is a really good point. When it comes to at least, Magic cards, there's alternatives. You can go buy a blind pack or a box, whatever, but there's this secondary market where you can purchase exactly the cards you want. So the consumer there absolutely has a choice. We get into this mindset sometimes with certain products that buying them a certain way is the way it has to be. But there are often alternatives that we just don't think of because we get into certain habits. So thank you, Kabuki, for bringing that up. Jeremy joins us to say, there are a few board game subscription boxes, and I think it's not the same thing. Card pack, it can be depressing. But for me, it's easier to just order the cards you want without needing a pack. There was a board game blind subscription service that had a booth at Gen Con. And they were selling these loot boxes that were, I think, about $60 a month. And you would get maybe 5 games in there of varying sizes and distribution and stuff like that. So that was kind of neat until the person standing next to me said, for $60 for a board game, I'm just going to go down to the next booth down the hall and I'm going to just buy the game I want. I'm not going to go and get a blind buy for games because those take so much more of a time investment to learn and play. That I'm definitely going to get what I want. And it reminds me a bit of what Kabuki just mentioned about when it comes to smaller ticket items like Magic boosters. Well, buying the cards you want instead of the Magic boosters. David mentions, are there any good board game subscription boxes? Well, Hasbro had one a couple years ago. I'm not sure if Hasbro's program is still going. There was a company, I want to say it was called Bento, Board Game Bento, I want to say. They started up, I think, year before last. And then there was a third one that, like I just mentioned, was at Gen Con this year. I will include links to all of the board game loot box companies I can find in the comments below. Kabuki mentions, I remember eating Cookie Crisp as a kid, and they gave out little toys of the Cookie Cop and Cookie Crook. I quickly learned that the ratio of Crook to Cop was like 10-1. Cops were oddly rare. How much Cookie Crisp did you end up eating when you were a kid, though? Because to be able to get enough of a data sample to make that sort of statistical analysis, that's a lot of milk right there. But it is interesting to know that even in the world of cereal, there can be different rarities in the little toys that they give out in those. So that's good to know. And Kabuki also asks, should cereal box toys be considered in this category? Yes. Now that I've read it, I'm going to say yes. Keenan joins us to say, I don't like regulation. I recall some game packs being advertised as guaranteed one foil or something like that. I think those and singles should be more tempting than risking all common cards. I kind of have to agree. I think anyone who has watched my videos on minimum advertised pricing policies or other things in the industry that happen that I don't particularly care for, I think anyone who's familiar with those videos would know I'm not a big fan of regulation for regulation's sake either. I'm more of a fan of developing a system like what Keenan says that kind of takes care of itself. Trevin also mentions that for loot boxes, once they close the servers, your loot goes away. You keep your CCG cards even if the game dies. Oh, that's a huge, huge argument against virtual cards on Magic Online. And one thing that's cool is that the company that recently started up Lightseekers and Warhammer 40k Champions, they have an online play model that you can do. But what you do is you actually, all the cards you buy have QR codes on them, and you scan your cards, and that puts it into your online collection. So you have both your physical cards forever and your online versions of those same cards up on the servers. And I think that that is a wonderful compromise. Knowing that that technology now exists, I will never, ever purchase another virtual online Magic card ever again, because that concept totally killed it for me. Christian mentions, games I would not buy blind, but geek merch totally would. Games require a lot more of time investment, and geek merch, could be anything. Hey, I'm gonna slip this neat shirt on. Oh, look, I got this neat keychain that I definitely couldn't get down at the kiosk in the airport next to the hot dog cart. This is really cool. So that totally, I can see that and respect that opinion there, Christian. Keenan also mentions, if our budget allowed it, I would love a monthly Star Wars t-shirt, but I wouldn't use Board Game Bento. I have a limited gaming budget and just can't justify getting 3 to 4 games that I may not like. Again, that kind of goes hand in hand right there with what Christian just said, with the games requiring more of a time, budget, and energy investment versus just getting some neat stuff that you might not have known existed. That, to me, again, your mileage may vary, but to me that totally makes sense. And finally, we're going to wrap up with one more comment, again, from Keenan, who just mentions that in talking about foils, you don't want to gloss over it. Thank you for filling today's pun quota. I greatly appreciate it. All right, so there you have it. There's kind of just, a first step. We cracked the pack on this conversation. And I don't know if you got out of this what you were hoping to get or if you got something different, but I'm tying it back together into the main topic there. Okay, it's what I'm doing. But anyway, the point is that there's a lot more on this topic to discuss. So we may pick this up. We already talked about how there are several different ideas in this conversation that could branch off into conversations of their own. So we might revisit this at a future date. But until then, I want to thank you for joining me and remind you that for more board game news and reviews and commentary and countdown videos, be sure to subscribe. And until the next time we get together, I've been Chaz Marler, who, along with the YouTube live streaming chat, have been serving up some table scraps. Thanks. Talk to you again soon. Hey there, everybody. Whoa, wow. Okay, let's knock the keyboard off the table, too. Too far, common, tar, and rare, predictor. Geek Mark. Geek Mark? Geek Mark. But Geek Gold? No, Geek Mark. Merch. Geek merch. I still have all of my spoons I haven't taken downstairs yet. All my breakfast spoons. I need to do that because I'm starting to embarrass myself. Games, I would not blind. That's not what he mentions either. Christian